It's the first pony car. It's such a legend, such an icon, that they made a whole song about it.
Barracuda.
The 1962 and 1963 Ford Mustang 1 and 2 concepts illustrated Ford's desire to create a whole new car market, focused around small, lightweight, and affordable sporty cars. And nobody really cared, except for Plymouth. Plymouth stylist Irv Ritchie took their existing Valiant sedan and sketched a coupe version of it. It was pretty simple to make their first pony car. And the executives were thrilled, since not only could they enter this new emerging market, they could stick it to the Chevy Corvair all in one go. Of course, Chrysler and therefore Plymouth were even more thrilled with their new turbine car program, which proceeded to suck up most of the development budget for this new pony car. So it would use the standard A-body platform and a handful of Chrysler engines, 2 base model slant 6s, and a shiny new 273 cubic inch V8 making 180 horsepower. And most importantly to me anyway, is that it had a radical, fantastic looking body with the largest glass rear window ever put on a road car. And in fact, it was so specialized and hard to make that it was actually the most expensive part on the car. Not really sure if that's worth the title of the largest rear window ever on a car, but regardless, Plymouth was all ready to go into production, and declared the Plymouth Panda ready for launch. Except they didn't, because that's a terrible frickin' name. That would be like naming Back to the Future Spaceman from Pluto or something. So instead, the Plymouth Barracuda launched on April Fool's Day 1964, 2 weeks before the Mustang. Yep, the Barracuda was actually the first pony car. So why don't we remember it like that? 3 reasons: branding, marketing, and performance. First, the Barracuda was basically a trim level of the already existing Valiant, so people didn't really think much of it, and their marketing department did not help with that. Ford ran ads focusing on the youthfulness and popularity of owning a Mustang, tapping into that new teenager market. Plymouth, meanwhile, did a different plan, and they marketed the Barracuda for everyone, showing not just its performance, but also its practicality and its luggage space. Yeah, take that as what you will. Then there were the specs. Compared to today, neither are much better than a Camry, but in 1964, the Mustang can make 225 horsepower at just 2,500 pounds. The Barracuda was 45 horsepower down and nearly 600 pounds heavier. All there is to say is that the Mustang sold over 126,000 cars in 6 months, while Plymouth could barely sell 23,000 Barracudas in the same time frame. So they adapted in 1965 with the Commando Formula S. The 4.5-liter V8 had new goodies like a more aggressive camshaft, a 10.5-to-1 compression ratio, and a 4-barrel carburetor to boost power over the Mustang at 235. And it wasn't just a power option. The Formula S got better suspension, bigger tires, disc brakes, air conditioning, and a tachometer. So sales did increase threefold to over 60,000 in 1965 and 1966. But after just 3 years, the Barracuda got a refresh into the second generation, and this sort of saw the transition from the chrome-dominating influences of the 50s into the more Coke bottle styling of the 1960s. And the engines changed as well. Now there was only a single inline-6 option with a whole lot of V8s, ranging all the way from the old 4.5-liter LA V8 all the way up to the 6.3-liter Super Commando V8. That's an awesome name. It sounds like a B-movie from 1983 starring Chuck Norris or something. The Super Commando got engine parts from its big brother, the Roadrunner, bringing power up to 300 horsepower. And Plymouth knew it could go faster, but the A-body exhaust layout restricted the horsepower. But that didn't stop people from trying. A privateer engineering firm named Autocraft purchased some second-generation Barracudas and turned them into Savage GTs. They ended up removing most of the exhaust to the bare minimum of legality, opening the door for more horsepower. And then to open that door a little more, the grille is removed to allow more airflow into the tuned-up engine. And Autocraft tuned up several engines and put them in the Savage, the 340, the 383, and the big 440 V8. Although most Savages were the 340 since an improved weight distribution by having 200 less pounds over the front axle, and that was very important to Autocraft, since the Savage GT could handle better than any other pony car of the era, thanks to functional aero, adjustable shocks, four-wheel disc brakes, bigger tires, and a full roll cage with harnesses. It meant business. The 340 made a fantastic 280 horsepower at a time when Plymouth's own 440 was barely hitting 300. Meanwhile, Autocraft's 440 made nearly 400 horsepower, and with tires rated for 150 miles an hour. But everybody sort of agrees that for one reason or another, no more than 13 Savages were made, and only 3 are known to survive today, 2 340s and 1 383. Now, if you want something that's slightly more common, yet still from the factory, you had to join the NHRA. In 1968, Plymouth followed the rest of Detroit and entered their car in the NHRA Superstock BA Class Drag Racing Series. In order to do that, though, they sent 70 Barracudas to Hearst Performance, where they were prepped for the strip. Bodywork was either replaced with fiberglass or dipped in acid to save weight. Same thing with the windows, as they were replaced with Lexan. The battery was moved to the back for better weight distribution and was finished off with a special 4-speed gearbox. But the biggest change was the new 426 cubic inch 4-barrel Hemi V8. These BO-29s easily took the 1969 Winter Nationals, including a 10.7 second run in the quarter mile in 1969. The final big swing of the second gen was the new CUDA package, which was basically a Formula S, but it was joined by optional racing seats, racing stripes, and an even bigger 7.2-liter Super Commando V8, now making 375 horsepower. In 1969, that made it the biggest engine ever put into a pony car. Which sort of begs the question, is it still a pony car? And the answer to that question is no. Because the third generation came out, and it really highlighted how the CUDA package signaled a change to the full muscle car market. Because now the third generation CUDA in 1970 was based off the Dodge Challenger E-body platform. So it was wider, lower, and more aggressive, finally shrugging off that valiant Sigma that had always followed it. Now the Hemi engine became a default option, it wasn't just for NHRA, and it became so common that third gens became known as the Hemi CUDA. The Hemi CUDA officially made 425 horsepower, but like every other engine from Detroit at the era, that was an underrated figure, and the 426 cubic inch V8 with the optional 6-pack carburetor is believed to have made just south of 500 horsepower. That gave it a 0 to 60 time of under 6 seconds, and this is not a very light car. And if you were really fancy, you could get one of 12 1970 Hemi CUDA convertibles, or the even rarer 1971 convertibles, where they only made 7 of them. They're some of the most valuable American cars ever made, with the 1971 example failing to sell for $4.6 million. Now, me personally, I've always preferred the 1970 AAR CUDA. It's a homologation special designed for the SCCA Trans Am series by Dan Gurney's All-American Racers, hence the AAR. And I'll be honest, the racing car wasn't very good. It was actually better in Europe, which we will get to in just a second. But the road car, the actual homologation, was fantastic. It had a lightweight 340 V8 with a forged crankshaft and aluminum intake manifolds. And since it was designed for track driving, it got heavy-duty shocks, better front and rear sway bars, a fiberglass hood, a rear wing, side exit exhaust, and racing stripes. Guaranteed to shave a second off your lap time. Not really, that's a joke. But also, it adds about 50 horsepower. I'm pretty sure that's scientifically proven. Now, the Barracuda is still quite rare with less than 2,500 sold, but it is a lot more affordable than the frankly silly figures of the convertibles. Now, I said that, ironically, the big American boat was more successful in Europe than it was in America. And that is because a racing team set up by Chrysler France ran a 1970 Hemi Cuda in the Group 1 class, winning 60 races and 3 championships in a row. So in 1973, they took the big American muscle car that's the size of most buildings in France to a seemingly less suitable challenge: hill climb racing. And once again, the Cuda stepped up to the plate, taking the 1973 crown. And finally, 2 years later, the French racer Michel Gouchiard bought an ex-Barracuda for the ultimate challenge: the 1975 24 Hours of Le Mans. And you know what? It failed to qualify. Turns out the Circuit de la Sarthe is too much for the big American boat, and quite frankly, I don't understand why they bothered to compete in the endurance race with not the most aerodynamic vehicle ever designed, with a thumping great American V8 that probably gets 9 mpg. And that effort at Le Mans pretty much summed up the last few years of the Barracuda. 1970 was really the last good year of sales, and between 1971 and 1974, the Barracuda lost engines and performance and therefore sales, resulting in Plymouth pulling the plug in 1974. Now, there were some waves made in 2019 when FCA renewed the copyrights to both the Barracuda and Cuda names, but nothing else has been said since, so that's probably just a way to keep the names in the possession of the company. Either way, though, we can remember the Barracuda is not just one of the founders of the pony car movement, but also as one of the brightest and most bombastic muscle cars ever made.